Hey guys, this is John at Trinity Metalworks. Typically, we're out on a job site or exploring the shop together and discussing different elements that we work with, primarily steel and concrete. And I thought it would be interesting to take a little deep dive together on a subject that comes up probably more commonly than anything else, and that is I really like this plan. How much does it cost? So I thought it'd be interesting to take a design that I've had recently shared with me and just walk through it together and talk about elements of the building and how they affect the cost so that you can start budgeting your home. So take, for example, this house here. It's what we call a single slope roof, although you'll notice when we get to the back side, or what's actually the curb side, that it has a gabled approach. But this particular house has a single slope roof covering the majority of it with a view towards the lake. I believe this plan is actually called the lakefront plan. So, as is common in homes on the lake, the centerpiece of your home is actually not the side that faces the road, but the side that faces the lake. So, you'll see in this particular building that the large, expansive porch captures most of the sunlight. You've got most of your outdoor events being hosted here as opposed to the front. So this is definitely a very common lake design. And if we look at this, first thing that we notice is a very large, expansive porch. So it's beautiful, right? Like we all would love to have a porch like this on the back of our house facing the water. But realistically, what would it cost to have something like that, and what would options be that could help reduce some of that cost? So first of all, this particular building lends itself particularly well to steel being used in the roof and in those columns as opposed to wood. Not saying it couldn't be done with wood, but steel in our case would be fairly simple. So going onto this website here, which they do have some excellent home plans, and buying a package plan from them, it's not going to accommodate itself to steel construction. So if you were to work, for example, with our company, we would take the basic layout and the basic plan and modify it so that it could work with steel. So let's just talk about this roof here. The roof is one large slope. Typically, you're going to have, at least in Texas, a minimum amount of slope. Um, if you want a steeper slope, it tends to get a little bit more expensive because you're going to get considerably higher on the tall end because your slope is going to be slanting at more steep grades until the uh, the peak of the roof is going to influence how tall your walls are and your air conditioned space and so forth. But there are also practical reasons why you might choose a less shallow roof. For example, if you've got a lot of sun hitting the backside of this house, you're only inviting more of it in. For example, wind and rain are also going to be blowing in underneath that space. So you could even have, as an option with this single slope roof, a kind of you could do so kind of a drop down wall, because most likely there isn't going to be a view from the house at this level here. So maybe for some weather considerations, we might add something like that. Um, and then the columns that are supporting that roof are going to have to grow quite large the taller it gets. So another good reason to keep that slope a little bit more shallow. And let's consider this basement down here as well. This basement is really cool. It's definitely not a common feature in Texas, but it certainly can be done. This has expense written all over it. So it might be better if we just consider this home from the top level only. So typically when you're looking at a home like this and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'd like to budget for something like this. What would be a good way for me to think about it? Because this porch is particularly well finished out, especially since you've got these shiplap boards up at the top, which is optional. You would probably be looking at somewhere around $60 to $70 a square foot to finish out this porch right here. So let's take a look at this floor plan here that they've provided and see how many details we can pull from it. So this covered deck is measuring 48 by 15, which if we're using some basic math, we can arrive at a number fairly quickly. Again, these are ballpark numbers and depend largely on what you're going to be uh, wanting that finish to look like. Is there going to be a lot of stone? Is there going to be a lot of wood? Or are we just looking at a fairly simple steel, a steel soffit under the roof and a steel wall on that back porch? So let's just run a quick number here. We've got our total square footage underneath that sloped uh, porch is 720 square feet. So given that 720 square feet, and we were roughly estimating 60 to $70, maybe $80, it might be a little bit high. Let's run with $70 a square foot on that porch, and that's going to land us at about $50,000 to finish out that porch. I know it sounds like a lot because we talk about porches off the back of our homes sometimes as just a single slope roof, but this is pretty well extensively finished out. Let's see if I can get out of here. Let's look at the back again. So as we're looking at this, we're seeing all that shiplap wood. All of our columns are wrapped in wood. We also have a very nice, this is a glass railing. I think a wrought iron railing would be just as attractive and much more cost effective. So let's talk about it now from terms of uh, a steel finish, primarily steel. So this home here, this might be kind of a board and batten finish on this particular home, but you could run it with steel with those vertical ribs running and get a very similar visual look, and perhaps even finish the underside of this roof with steel. Maybe even leave your columns exposed. You might paint them, or we could wrap them. That's not a terribly expensive feature to add, honestly, wrapping them with some cedar. So let's just look at the steel underside with the steel wall across here rather than shiplap. And I would say that you could probably land yourself a little bit closer to that $60 a foot range, which would then give us a price of about 43,000. So we saved somewhere around 7 grand. And again, these are rough numbers, right? I think we're all understanding there. But so now we're looking at this porch finished out, most likely on grade. By on grade, I'm referring to this being level with your ground as opposed to having a basement level. Let's ignore the basement for just a little bit. You've got a little walkway up to here, maybe some stairs leading down to a pool in the backyard. And we're looking at about 43,000 to 50,000 on our exterior here to finish out this porch, which is a very beautiful porch, you have to admit. So taking that into consideration, in the next video, we're going to move on to the house. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching.